takes it all the way.
Upended at the 35-yard line. Emanuel.
Kyle Emanuel.
We love this player, the way he plays. Man, this guy makes plays.
Is sacked by Kyle Emanuel, the winner of the Buck Buchanan Award. That goes to the best defensive player in the country.
Oh, we haven't heard the Kyle Emanuel intro. I haven't in forever as he joins us here live on location. I edited that together forever ago. It's good to have it back.
I know, right? I was on with Eric last week and heard, I was like, you guys probably had to dust that off, find it in the archive somewhere. And but yeah, it's good to be back with you, Dom, in a place that I love.
Yes.
And here we are again for the 11th time.
So I know we talked about this with Jeff and Mike. I'll get your thoughts on this. If this is the last hurrah, what do you make of that? You've been to Nashville. You played in Nashville. How do you feel about this if this is it?
It's bittersweet, right? I think if you talk to a lot of fans around Fargo, around the state of North Dakota, they love Frisco. Like, it's been a great venue for a long time. They've had a blast here. I mean, going back to 2012, January of 2012, I guess, for the first time. And they've had a lot of great memories here. At the same time, I think they're ready to see something different. I think we all are now. I would be fine if it comes back in 2 years, 2 years in Nashville, and who knows if it comes back. But it's been a great venue. I think the city of Frisco has embraced it, and they've really made this a really good venue for the FCS National Championship. They made it a big deal, which it should be. At the same time, I've been to Nashville before. Like you just mentioned, I played there against the Titans a couple times. That's also a great city, and I think a lot of people would have fun there. But either way, I personally, I'd like to see it rotate a little bit. If they, I don't know how easy that would be, but if you could find a way, maybe it's in Frisco, then it's in Vegas, sure, maybe.
Vegas wants everything.
Nashville, whatever, to keep Frisco in the rotation. But I think it would be good for fans, players alike, to maybe move this thing around.
I'm interested because in your home state, the College World Series has been in Omaha forever. Yeah. That's a staple. I think they were hoping for this, but when you have a major renovation, you can't have one side of the stadium closed, especially when we know the teams that are likely going to be here. I don't think that's going to change over the next handful of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a good thing you bring up there. The College World Series has been in Omaha forever, and I don't think when Frisco took this over, they could have ever imagined that North Dakota State would be here 11 out of the 15 years, or South Dakota State's been here 3 times. Now Montana State's back for the second time. Like, you have that many teams come back, that's when fans start to want something else.
Yep.
But at the same time, I also believe, and I know I'm biased here, but I think North Dakota State put this venue this week on the map. I don't think they also could have imagined the outpouring of fans that would come down year in, year out. And they've been pretty fortunate with some of the fan bases that have made it here.
Well, I'm looking around here. There's a bunch of Montana State stuff we're seeing here. We were down at the Star last night. We've talked about this earlier in the show. I want to get your thoughts. It seems to me your senior year, that Illinois State, when so many people came down, or the Towson year to complete the three-peat, that it seems like that for Montana State fans this season.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what the numbers end up shaking out tonight, but I would not be shocked if there's more Montana State fans. It's been 40 years, Dom, since they won a national championship for a very proud program. I was talking to some people this week and saying, just imagine if, let's say, we lost the first time we came down here in January of 2012, and then 2 years later we had another shot. There'd be a ton of fans there, especially now. Imagine how long of a drought it's been for some of those fans, how hungry they are for a national championship. You could tell they're out here. As you mentioned, we were there at the Star last night when they were having their pep rally. There's a ton of fans pouring into their pep rally, and I'm sure it was a fun event in there. So you could tell, as you mentioned, there's already some people out here right now. They're fired up. They're excited for this one.
I got to ask you about one of your old coaches. Brent Vigen's the guy on the other sideline. And how badly does he need this tonight, do you think?
Well, I don't think he needs it in terms of, like, his resume at Montana State. I was looking through some of their game notes, Dom, and he's already climbed, I think he's second or third in career wins at Montana. Feels like he just got there. He already has, I believe, 8 playoff victories. He's been able to accomplish a lot, and this is a team that hadn't been here forever until he got there. So I don't think I think he's done enough at Montana State to submit. Obviously, he got the contract extension, but the fact that it's NDSU, Montana State's lost to a Dakota State school the last 5-6 years. Their season has ended to either South Dakota State or Montana State or to North Dakota State. I think that, and then coupled with going against Tim Polasek, a guy that they were on staff together for a long time when I started at NDSU. I think it means a little bit more to him, the fact that it is against his alma mater, a place he coached, a place where he grew up around North Dakota State. Without a doubt, this is a big deal for him.
I want to have you expound a little bit on what we were talking about on Fargo to Frisco last night, of your 4 trips down here, of that winning mentality. What was it about when you got here to say, this is a business trip, we're here to win a football game?
I remember, the first time we did this, and Coach Bull obviously had been through bowl games, and he took that similar approach, and he basically told us, in not so many words, that we can either take this as, hey, we're happy to be here, we're going to enjoy these. I think we had 3 weeks that first time. Yeah. Or we could take the mentality of this, as you mentioned, this is a business trip. This is to go win a national championship. This is a big deal. We're going to take it seriously. We're going to do everything we can in the prep. So when we get to Frisco, the hay is in the barn. We're ready to go. We're ready to rock. And so I just remember feeling fully prepared every time we got here. The confidence level was at all-time high. Anytime I thought we didn't play a Valley school, which obviously we did my senior year, we felt like we had a physicality advantage. Looking at this game, when you talk about a Brent Vigen team, I don't know if that's the case because they might be a Big Sky team, but they obviously understand how to play physical football. But it's the same thing I told you, yesterday, Dom. It's embracing the moment. It's capturing it and understanding it and recognizing how big of a deal this is, but also kind of putting that to the side a little bit and understanding at the end of the day this is a football game. I always think it's interesting playing in Frisco in Toyota Stadium. It's still a little different. You get used to, especially this year, pretty much every year, played 3 straight weeks in the Fargo Dome, inside, on turf. When's the last time NDSU played on grass? Was it Colorado?
Colorado, yeah.
It just doesn't happen. So, I mean, not that that's a huge factor in the game, but things it's just slightly different, right? It's just a little bit different. Same thing for Montana State. They get used to playing at home. So there are some things that are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, can you execute? Do the lights get too big for you once, the ball gets kicked off, or do you still hone in on your task, hone in on your assignment, eliminate mistakes? Because in a game like this, I really think it might come down to, where does the tide turn? I was looking back at some of the things you were posting on Twitter of our old championship games, and some of those, you look at Towson and Sam Houston State, well, both Sam Houston State, really, like, there was one play or there was a couple plays in there where some of those games looked like blowouts, but they weren't.
No, not early on. They were not. Nope.
Sam Houston State, even the second time, was close up until the third quarter. It's going to be 1 or 2 plays in there that you got to find a way to execute.
You mentioned you've had so many great games, but you had a lot of great games in this stadium behind me. How personally gratifying? I know you wanted to win the championship, but you played well in the championship game.
Yeah, I think I always took the mentality of I wanted to contribute somehow, and a lot of it went back to what I was just talking about and executing on little tasks. I know you played the clip of the one, well, it wasn't a sack, but the hurry I had against Sam Houston State, and that was a little thing. I was telling you this last night. It was a play call. If it's a fake to the running back, if it's play action, the quarterback boots out, you pay no attention to the running back and you go straight to the quarterback and execute it on that. And so it's little things like that. But yeah, I think without a doubt, I wouldn't say I've had the best games in my career in this stadium, but had a lot of good games and was able to contribute. And obviously it wasn't just me. It was collectively 22 guys, more than that on special teams, finding a way to execute a little thing. You think of the fake punt in 2012, the first time we were here against Sam Houston State, and just everyone being on the same page there. That was one of those plays that turned things. So yeah, guys are going to want to have, especially you talk about seniors, think of Cam Miller in his last game here. This is where you want to perform your best.
Right. It's a great segue, because I was going to ask you that about, they've pushed it as far as they can. For a guy like Eli and Will Mostert, they played 6 years. There's no other games. You pushed it as far as you could. You and Christian Dudzik, I think, you played 60-some-odd games. The finality of that, what was that emotion like? Granted, you won, but the emotion of that tonight for these guys.
Yeah, I remember you interviewing me after that last game and asking me basically the same question, and I didn't really know how to answer it in terms of, because it was.
Well, you had the NFL, you had professional football.
I was leaving after that game. You're right. It's we kind of talk about this similar thing when we talk about senior night, and it's the culmination of everything you've gone through, from being a freshman and not even understanding what the heck you just gotten yourself into in those fall camps and all those workouts with Coach Kramer, everything. And we got to culminate with, I was a senior and we had a chance at a 4-peat, and then we give up the long touchdown run. Carson and RJ do their thing, and they go down and seal that game. Esley seals the game with an interception. I don't know how you properly describe the emotions I went through that day, the highs, the lows, and then obviously moving on to a potential NFL career. But it's special. That's all I can say. It's special to be able to end your Bison career in this stadium and hopefully, raising a trophy.
Last thing before we go to break, and then we'll actually talk about the X and O's. Polisic came by yesterday, and you mentioned the hay in the barn line. He looked right at the camera and says, "You coach all the way to kickoff, but the hay's in the barn." Yeah. So is that a Craig Bowl line that you guys heard often as well?
Yeah, I think it is, and he's right. Obviously, there's always going to be little adjustments, but yeah, they have their plan. They've known about Montana State for a long time. They've had 2+ weeks to prepare for them. It's there now. You got the game plan. Everyone feels good about it. A lot of these practices. I would call them like review practices.
So I was going to ask you, so when you were playing, you did all the work you guys did in Fargo, right? You didn't do really anything when you got here.
No, we got here and basically, we were getting here on Wednesdays, and the Wednesday was basically a Friday practice. You basically had 2 Friday practices where, again, I'd call them like reviews. Right? Yeah, you're going through and you're doing your typical Friday where you're just kind of reviewing everything everything's already been in. You know what the game plan is. You know what's on the call sheet. The new blitzes, whatever you've put in, it's already in, and now you just get here, kind of get to enjoy and dial in on 60 minutes here in Toyota Stadium.
We'll break with Kyle. We come back. We'll get to the X and O's of this, the Bison defensive line, how they stop Tommy Mellott, what the Bison can do. It's all coming up. We come back. We're live just outside Toyota Stadium. Hot Mic continues on WDAY Extra, Inforum.com, KSFL, KMBN. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody. Hot Mic rolls on. Final 40 minutes here. You'll hear from Bison All-American left tackle Gray Zabel coming up. Back with a fellow Bison All-American, Kyle Emanuel. I got a couple of emails in here. Kyle, we've not heard your thoughts. What's going on with South Dakota State and what's transpired the last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess my initial thought was this is what happens with success. And North Dakota State's gone through this a little bit. I don't know to this degree. We kind of thought this might potentially happen a year ago.
Correct.
We were sitting there and I was under the mindset of, and I know some of these players didn't know Tim Polisic, but if you could just stick around and get to know him, and I think people at this point do, you're going to fall in love with him, and you're going to want to play for a guy like that. But NDSU has obviously had a ton of success. Other teams have come in and tried to poach their players. They've had coaches leave. Yep. Some players have left. It's just the state of college football. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it. It's I think it's a little unfortunate for the FCS when you lose talent like that.
Yes.
At the same time, I tell people this all the time about this business, especially in the coaching business. If you want to keep moving up, unfortunately, you have to leave and you have to go to other places. Unless you have the loyalty. I'm sure South Dakota State fans are upset about it. Jimmy Rogers was their guy. He was the guy who played there, who was, the next guy in line after Stig.
Guy. Yep.
And now he's gone just after 2 years. Feels like he just got started there. And now you're seeing a lot of different guys leave. So I think it's kind of twofold for me, Dom, as an alum and South Dakota State. And I'm kind of like, well, too bad. But at the same time for FCS, it's tough because of how talented that team has been for a long time, how good they are. And look, it wouldn't shock me if they find a way to reload and they're right back in the mix of it next year.
They'll be fine. Yep. It's not like they're going to win 4 games next year. They're going to be fine. Griffin Wilde goes to Northwestern. Yeah. We saw him up close the last 2 years. He's dynamite. They need a quarterback still at Northwestern. Yeah. And by the way, Wilde's quarterback is still out there.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, Gronowski, that's going to be something to follow and where he ends up.
I'm stunned at that, by the way. Sorry to distract, but I think we all assumed he was done. He was going to the NFL.
Yeah.
The fact that he may play college football again next year actually did surprise me.
I wonder if he heard something or if he talked to scouts or whatever agent he's talking to, if they said, hey, we think you'd benefit from another year in a different, maybe slightly different system. I don't know if he goes to Washington State, I would assume it's very similar type of system. But I think if for your NFL chances, maybe you'd benefit from playing one more year. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened there? But obviously, I think he's going to explore all his options and try to find the best one.
Kyle, how does the Bison defensive line stop Tommy Mellott? That's a good one.
Well, Don, I think I've told you this a couple times throughout the year, and some of these questions. Like if I knew the answer, I probably wouldn't be standing here with you. I'd probably be coaching and have a headset on, and everyone would want to talk to me because I'd have the answer to maybe the hardest question. Right? Look, to me, it's not just the defensive line. It's literally all 11. However cliche that is, but I was watching some of their film when they played South Dakota, and the announcers made a comment like, well, they average over 300 rushing yards, but they're not an option team. And it's like, no, they're not. They're not the traditional under center triple option team that we saw like from my Cornhuskers back in the day. But It to me, there's like 3 different options on a lot of their plays. They're going to run like a zone scheme to one side. They're going to bring a tight end across. Now they're going to fake it to the running back. You can either hand it off to the running back. Obviously, Tommy Malott can keep it. He can run with it. Or you got a tight end to the flat. Or they're going to hit you with the play action. They're going to hit something downfield. Like, there's so many different things that they can do offensively on each different play. And that's why I think he's been so efficient throwing the ball is because of how dynamic they are running it. And that is why I said in our first segment, it comes down to the X's, O's, and executing and understanding what's my assignment. Okay, if they do this, where do I have to be first? What's my first key? What's my first read? I have to take care of that first. Now what do I have to do secondary? Like, and it does come down to the defensive line. I talked about that zone scheme. They want to get defensive linemen running horizontally, or they want to get you way upfield and get you out of position. And so now, Adam Jones, Scott Humphrey can make cuts, downfield, and now they can get their running backs going. So it's going to start with the defensive line. They have to be stout. Obviously, gap sound. South Dakota did something interesting. I think that at least worked initially, where they were lining up their defensive ends really tight. It was almost, talk about a 5 technique, you're a little bit more on the edge. They were almost in a 4, almost head up on the tackle, I think, trying to shrink those gaps down a little bit and to gap it. And they had, guys like Mike Keese-Grace that could do that. So I know I just said a lot of things. There's a lot.
There's a lot
that goes into. And then, the final thing in that piece, Dom, is I talked about, the 3 options or whatever they're going to have on each offensive play. But then there's always the little thing that you can't really account for because you don't know what it's going to look like. And that's Tommy Malott when things break down, when it's a pass play and this guy's not there and he takes off and runs, he gets outside of the pocket. Those are the things you can't account for. And that's just 11 guys hustling, getting to the ball. And then, of course, the big word, the key word, tackling. You got to find a way to get him to the ground.
I got to go to your old position, defensive line. How does that Bison defensive line, when you've watched it, looked at the tape, how do they match up with Montana State's offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's similar to – I think this team is in ways they're similar to South Dakota State. And I think their offensive line is going to fire off the ball, and that's what I mean. You have to be stout. You can't get moved off the ball. There's going to be a lot of double teams. I talked about the zone scheme. They also run something people call it different things throughout the football world, but I call it duo, where essentially you're going to double team, usually at the guard position. You're going to get double teams. You're going to try and drive that defensive tackle back and then work up to the second level, or you just drive the defensive lineman so far back that he gets in the lap of a linebacker and you effectively block him that way. So double teams are going to be big. Think of a guy like Cody Heisman. He's come to mind.
Gosh,
I know we've talked a ton about him. Obviously, Eli Mostart, Jackson, all the guys along that defensive front, they're going to have to be able to take on double teams. I think that's going to be key in this game and how well they can do it. South Dakota did a decent job of it, at least early on in that game, somewhat limiting the run, but obviously they got theirs in that game as well. So it's always going to come down to the trenches. I almost don't – I think when I first started doing media, I brought it up every single game. I don't do that anymore because it's just like you just have to know if you win the line of scrimmage, it's not a guaranteed you're going to win the game, but it's a pretty good chance you're going to win it.
Cam Miller was announced earlier that he's going to go to the East-West Shrine game. I know a game that's close to your heart. I think it was just a matter of time, I thought, for an all-star game invite. I thought he earned that after we were at the Peyton Award the other night. But does he have – I thought he needed to have his best game for them to beat the Jacks. He did. Does he need another best game here tonight for them to win?
I think so. I do. I know you were talking with Mike and Jeff about Trey Lance's performance in his one national championship game. I would not be surprised to see a heavy dose of Cam Miller running the ball. Obviously, we know what he can do throwing the ball. But if quarterback run game is a thing that's going to move the football,
that happened against the Jacks.
It is. It's not going to be off the table. I think we could see a ton. I wouldn't be shocked to see Cam Miller carry the ball 10, 15, 16, 17 times in this ball game. But yeah, I think without a doubt, we'll talk about it in our pregame show, but the connection with him and Bryce Lance is going to have to be there. They're going to have to find their shots downfield. I also think you got to find a way, because we haven't seen it a ton, get Marty Brown going a little bit, get Barika Penu going a little bit, take some pressure off of Cam Miller in this ball game. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you want to simplify this game, which I know so much more goes into it than just saying, whichever quarterback plays better, the offensive line has to block. There's so much more that goes into it. But I kind of think if you want to simplify it, whichever quarterback plays better, whichever quarterback makes the play in those clutch moments, because I think it might come down to a few of those, it's probably who wins the game.
I think you make a great point about the running backs, because the Bison offensive line against Montana State in the playoff matchups have owned them. The Bison nearly ran for 300 yards in that game in Bozeman. I think people forget that last year, considering what Malott did against the Bison. But TK Marshall scores that touchdown late in the fourth quarter to force overtime, and the Bison were leaning Tamarick Williams had 2 long runs in that game. I'm not saying they're going to be able to do that tonight, but I do think there will be more holes for Marty Brown and Barica than we saw against Mercer and against South Dakota State.
I think so too. I think this is a good defense. I think Montana State's a really good defense. Brody Greby's a really good player.
Ort's really good at the safety spot.
They got players all over the field, but you're right. You know, even go back to the last time these two teams met here in Frisco, and it was over early. NDSU was able to run all over them. South Dakota, you know, they got 14 points early in their last ball game against Montana State.
Tyson Pierre were moving it.
They were moving the ball. So I think they will find a little bit more success. I don't know how much it'll be. I don't know if it's something they can lean on the entire game, but it's got to be enough to open up the play action pass game to take some pressure off of Cam Miller.
You mentioned Bryce Lance. I don't want to give away the kitchen sink on Kyle's clicker on Bison game day. Asking for 3 touchdowns is you just can't do that. But how do they get him open again, knowing everyone's going to be focusing on where number 5 is?
Well, I was just going to say, maybe he doesn't have to get open. Maybe because of the game he's had, because of the season he's had with 16 touchdowns, maybe he is a little bit of a decoy. Maybe some other people get open because of him. You know, but at the same time, and you'll see it on the clicker, is South Dakota State was what I call bracketing him, where they basically sit a guy on the inside and take away any type of slant, and they have a corner on the outside. And Cam Miller just said, I don't care. I'm still going to throw it to my guy. At the end of the day, it's still a one-on-one if he just runs straight downfield. So he's a guy that when he's covered, he's still a little bit open because of his size and his ability to go up and catch the football. So Cam's done a really good job of putting it up high, putting it in places where only he can get it. He's going to have to be key in this game, but it could, potentially be in a different type of way depending on how Montana State wants to play him.
Give me a player on each side that maybe we haven't talked about yet that can step out or step up and cause this team to win the game.
Well, I just mentioned Brody Grebe. I think he can be a difference maker. I think they got a couple wide receivers Montana State does that you don't think about because of how well they run the football.
McCutcheon's really good.
But because of how well they run it.
Love Taco Dollar. Taco Dollar is great. He's a really good player.
They got some guys that are there. For NDSU, it's I know you guys just talked about Luke Wirtz being out, so maybe it's a Nick Kubitz type of game. You never know. I think about Logan Kopp maybe shows up in this game. We've seen him show up in really big moments. It's hard to pick just one, Dom, because I truly do think, I'm not just saying, I think it's going to come down to a few plays here or there, and it might be one of those games you just don't know who it's going to be. Think about Travis Beck, and the first time we were here, he gets the MVP. You just never know who it's going to be.
Didn't see that coming. I'll tell you that right now.
But someone's got to find a way to step up, and I'm excited to see those 4, 5, 6 plays and who steps up in those moments.
Being back here, is it just the memories flood back when you come back here?
Yeah, I think so. Being back at that practice, with all the former players, it's still the same practice field. The locker rooms are still there. Obviously, the stadium's changed a little bit, but I think this is my 9th time here. 4 as a player, now 5 not as a player, and it's fun every single time. It's exciting to see all the fans, and obviously, as we mentioned, getting to see guys end their careers maybe on that stage. Always fun to be back in Frisco.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming out, bud. Yeah. We'll see Kyle coming up later today on Bison Game Day at 5:30. Also be part of Bison Pregame Live at 2:30 on Inforum.com. We'll break here on Hot Mic. We come back. You'll hear from Bison All-American left tackle Gray Zabel about playing his last game, and then the NFL ahead. That's coming up when Hot Mic returns.